video, 26-year CIA operations officer Tom Briggs recounts his personal mission while a CIA operative in Laos to find American prisoner of war Eugene DeBruin, who was shot down in 1963 in an Air America C-46 and held captive by the communist Pathet, Laos. Briggs details his search and the CIA's stonewalling of his investigation. DeBruin remains missing to this day.
Preparing the manuscript for my book about my participation in CIA's secret war in Laos, and particularly Eugene DeBruin's story, I found a quote attributed to former POW Red McDaniel that seems very fitting. He said, "As an American asked to serve, I was prepared to fight, to be wounded, to be captured, and even prepared to die, but I was not prepared to be abandoned." Eugene DeBruin arrived in Laos in 1963 as an employee of Air America. He was a kicker, or air cargo handler. A kicker flies in the cargo bay of fixed-wing aircraft and pushes the bundles of cargo rigged with parachutes out of the back of the aircraft. His aircraft was on a rice-dropping mission when the enemy shot it down. What was Air America, and what was it doing dropping rice to villages in Laos in 1963? Air America was a proprietary established by CIA so it could control the security of its air operations in support of U.S. government covert activities. Eugene DeBruin was an employee of CIA's proprietary Air America, and had he survived more than 1 month, he probably would have worked all his time in Laos for the arm of Air America that supported the U.S. Agency for International Development mission in Laos. Eugene DeBruin had been a U.S. Air Force non-commissioned officer and a Montana smoke jumper. The CIA hired ex-smoke jumpers as agency employees, while others were hired as employees of Air America. For Air America's contract with USAID, it used fixed-wing aircraft such as C-46, C-47, C-7A Caribou, C-123s, and rotary wing aircraft such as H-34 helicopters to transport cargo and people from airfield to airfield, and for dropping supplies by parachute in support of USAID's refugee relief and other humanitarian efforts in Laos. I witnessed a USAID rice drop at one of my operational sites, which was PS7 near the village of Kong Mi, close to the Cambodian border in southern Laos, which I visited often in a Pilatus Porter, short takeoff and landing aircraft. On one trip to PS7, I told Gray Fox, the POXA operations officer, that I would stay at PS7 for a couple of hours and asked to be let off and picked up later in the day. PS7 was equipped with a single sideband radio with which I could talk to Gray Fox, or indeed all the way to Vientiane if necessary. Additionally, I had a handheld VHF radio known as an HT2. The pilot took off, leaving me alone, deep in the jungles, a long, long way from any place safe. I was not particularly worried, and I went about my business. I was in the thatched roof hut we used as our headquarters and that housed the single sideband radio when I heard a long series of heavy thumps. I looked out the windows of the hut and saw villagers running toward the airstrip. Curious, I went out toward the airstrip too. There were sacks of rice all over the strip. Some were broken open, but most were intact. An Air America C-46 had bombed PS7 with its monthly ration of rice. The village officials picked up the double-wrapped rice sacks, put them in storage for later issuing to the villagers. But blown open sacks were considered fair game for anyone in the village who could get them and scoop up the rice before village officials got to them. Eugene DeBruin was shot down on 5 September 1963 while aboard a C-46 dropping rice to a Royal Lao Army position in Savannakhet Province. While the pilot and co-pilot died in the crash, 5 crew members survived by parachuting from the aircraft before it hit the ground. Air America employees Eugene DeBruin, 3 Thais, and 1 Taiwanese were captured after landing on the ground. They were held in various prison camps in the area until May 1964, when the 5 escaped, but were recaptured in a few days. The Pathet Lao photographed the 5 and distributed the photo widely in propaganda publications. Eventually, Jerry DeBruin, Eugene's brother, obtained a copy of this photo. This was the first concrete evidence for Jerry that his brother had survived the shootdown. In June 1966, the 5 Air America prisoners, plus U.S. Air Force pilot Dwayne Martin and U.S. Navy pilot Dieter Dengler, were in the same prison camp at Ban Hui Het in Savannakhet Province in Royal Lao Military Region 3. They all initially escaped, but all but 1 was recaptured. Dengler was picked up by helicopter 23 days after the escape and was one of the only 2 U.S. pilots in Laos captivity who escaped during the war. Later, one of the Thais was liberated from the Mahasai prison camp by a CIA-orchestrated Lao Irregular Commando Raider unit from Savannakhet in the only known successful POW rescue of the Vietnam War, the Ban Nha Den raid. No Americans were in the camp when the rescue was made. Dieter Dengler and the Thai Pisidi Indradot provided information about Eugene DeBruin for the time they were all in the same prison camp. Dieter Dengler's life and his experience in Laos were the subject of a 1997 documentary film by a German filmmaker titled Little Dieter Needs to Fly, and a fictional Hollywood movie, Rescue Dawn. Dieter Dengler and Pisidi Indradot consider the movie a slanderous libel of Eugene's character and a grievously false retelling of the story and the relationships among the prisoners. I first heard Eugene DeBruin's story from Lee Gossett in early 1971. I knew Lee from flying with him whenever he was in Pathet. The Continental Porter pilots rotated from among the CIA's several special operations bases known as units. I was not particularly aware of what their rotation schedule was or how long they stayed. I just knew that a pilot like Lee would fly for us for a while and then be gone until the next time his rotation brought him to Pathet. Lee was very professional, inspired confidence, and was very likable. We were sitting up country at PS-22 one day when Lee asked me to look at some materials he had. He handed me information about Eugene that Jerry DeBruin, Eugene's brother, had prepared. It detailed Eugene's story. I read it with interest. There was significant emphasis from CIA headquarters in Washington for information about American POWs, and we had a high priority requirement to gather intelligence on whether they were in Laos and where. Lee knew that I handled all the Roadwatch assets in MR4 and that I could have my teams take the material out with them and distribute them to villagers. These were local indigenous teams we trained and employed to report on enemy units traveling down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. A CIA case officer working out of Savannakhet unit had helped Jerry DeBruin make up small plastic-covered cards in the Lao language that asked for information about his brother Eugene. I was more than willing to help Lee and Jerry, but I wanted to do more than just send the cards out and distribute them. I told Lee I would give one of my teams specific requirements to collect information about Eugene. Lee and Jerry's proposal was that I send the cards into areas where Eugene was known to have been. I really only had one team that regularly operated in such an area. Team Papaya 305 was a team I had inherited from the Northern Guerrilla Zone Roadwatch operation at LS 171. The Roadwatch case officer's Lao code name was Hang. He was a former U.S. Army Special Forces operator. We used code names to protect our true identities, and I am still not authorized to use his true name. He told me that Boonlert, the Pampaya team leader, had been one of their very best team leaders. They felt he was more courageous than most and had been honest and reliable. I should note that we used names like papaya, durian, and mango because CIA headquarters required that we use them, but we used numbers with the teams because they were easier to use with the Laos soldiers. Heng told me that Boonlert had a problem on his last mission, on a mission to the area of Mung Nong, an area well known to Boonlert because he was originally from there. One of Boonlert's agents told him about a prison camp near Mung Nong and said the camp held 12 American prisoners. Heng put a camera in the next parachute resupply drop with instructions for Boonlert to give the camera to the agent and asked the agent to take photographs of the camp and the American prisoners. Boonlert already had a camera, and when the new one arrived, he decided to keep the new camera for his team's use and give the old one to the agent. This made sense to Boonlert because he felt he would put the new camera to better use in a wider variety of tasks, while the old camera was only going to be used to photograph the prison camp. Unfortunately, Boonlert did not take into account that he had already used the camera to take photographs of several of his agents in the area. The agent went back to the area of the prison camp with the old camera where the NVA arrested him. They developed the film and found photographs of the prison camp as well as various inhabitants of the area. The NVA interrogated the agent and learned that the individuals on the film were his subagents. The NVA executed the agent. Heng had seen an intercepted NVA message that disclosed the agent's fate and what was on the roll of film. Boonlert was out on mission when the North Vietnamese Army message was intercepted and did not immediately learn what had happened from his error of giving the agent the old camera. Heng was concerned that this incident might affect Boonlert's ability to perform as well as he had in the past. In fact, Boonlert had lost all of his current informants. It was common for team leaders like Boonlert to use family and friends as agents. It was highly probable that Boonlert's actions had caused harm not only to the agent, but to the subagents as well, all of whom were probably close to him. I was going to send him out on his first mission subsequent to the disaster of losing all his informants. When using Lao Tung, they were usually only effective in their home areas. Thus, it was incumbent on me to send Boonlert back to his home area or not use him as a team leader. I felt that his previous excellent record was enough reason to trust him and see if he could rebuild his informant network. Besides, we did not have any other men who were team leader material from that area, so it was send Boonlert or give up on missions to Mung Nong. I worked out an extensive list of questions about Eugene DeBruin with Lee Gossett. I then worked with my Thai operations assistants to carefully get the questions translated into Lao and directed the operations assistants to go over the questions with Boonlert to be sure he understood them all. I felt confident that if we could obtain any intelligence about the alleged prison camp near Mung Nong, Boonlert and Team Papaya 305 would be able to do it. In any job, a person wants to do well and be recognized by his superiors. I could have just taken this on because it was part of the job, or I could have worked hard at it because there would be recognition for having collected intelligence against one of our high priority requirements. A case officer always looks good if he can produce well received intelligence, but I made an emotional investment in this effort to uncover information about the fate of Eugene DeBruin. At this point, 1971, Eugene was missing for 8 years. I thought this was excruciating for his family, and it must have been hell for him. I got together with Nippon and Vero, the two Thai senior LS 171 operations assistants, and discussed the requirement. I told them I wanted the team to put a major effort into uncovering information about Eugene DeBruin. Most of the time, I briefed my operations assistants and they briefed the teams. But from time to time, I took a special interest in a particular mission and wanted to brief the team myself. I explained the special interest we had in finding prisoners of war, gave them Jerry DeBruin's materials, and explained that I wanted the materials distributed to the villagers. I also gave them a list of questions, requirements in intelligence jargon, about prisoners of war in general, and some specific questions about Eugene DeBruin. I tried to make them understand this was very important to me. I didn't offer any additional money, as that would have been a bad precedent to set, but it still made a difference to them that I, Tan Chan, personally briefed them and asked them to do something special. It gave them a little more face. Definitely a good thing to do if I wanted an extra effort. I didn't know that when Boulert and Team Papaya 305 did uncover and report information about Eugene DeBruin, the information would languish in a twilight zone created by CIA people who had no understanding of special operations in Laos, nor how intelligence information was reported, and DIA people who had no understanding of how the CIA functions. Moreover, all of them were willing to understand in their own parochial ways and never knew what they did not know or whom to ask to get the real story. They made faulty assumptions. In March 1971, Team Papaya 305, while on mission with the materials I gave them about Eugene DeBruin, reported that they had spoken to a villager who gave them information about Eugene after looking at his photograph. We cabled the information obtained by the team from Pakse Unit to Vientiane Station and Udon Base, as that was the custom at the time. The Pakse reports officer was not sure the information rose to the level of being disseminable to the entire intelligence community on its own, as an official CIA intelligence report. However, such information was often sent to the Vientiane Station report section in case they thought it did or in case it might be incorporated as a paragraph in an overall summary of POW sightings. Later, CIA personnel who lacked knowledge of how things worked in a place like Laos made much of the report not being directly disseminated. The lack of independent dissemination has transmuted into declarations that it was evidence that the report was considered a fabrication. After obtaining the initial information, Team Papaya 305 was never able to get any more information about Eugene DeBruin. After 2 years in Laos, running roadwatch and intelligence teams, I think I have an understanding how things worked with the teams. If the team were going to fabricate, they would have fabricated much more to add to the above report. I gave them a very long list of questions. They would have fabricated answers to many more questions, and they would have not included negative information, such as not having knowledge of whether he received packages or not. They answered only the questions their source could answer, and said when they did not know an answer, which was not the pattern I saw with fabricators. They fabricated as many answers as they could, and they were always able to go back and get more information by fabricating the trip and the information. Boonlert's report rings true to me, at least in that he reported what the source told him. I also believe the source was reporting reliably. It was not until early 1991, almost 20 years later, that I was back in touch with Jerry DeBruin, and we have stayed in touch ever since. I have tried to help him deal with CIA and DIA bureaucracy to get the Team Papaya 305 March 71 report acknowledged, but to no avail. One thing I have never understood is the stonewalling by the CIA. Eugene DeBruin was an employee of Air America, a publicly acknowledged CIA proprietary. In this case, Air America existed only to carry out a mission for the U.S. government, and it operated with funds from the U.S. government. How could any employee of Air America not be considered an employee of the CIA? Well, I can see that the CIA would be touchy about allowing the measure of employment to be whether a person carried out CIA directions and received money allocated from U.S. funds, as that would make any spy recruited to steal secrets an employee. But why didn't the CIA quietly act in a much more helpful way instead of treating Jerry DeBruin like a total outsider? Someone representing the CIA even went to Eugene DeBruin's poor parents and asked them to accept a paltry amount of money and sign a quitclaim. Eugene has now been in MIA status over 40 years. How much money in back pay would he or his family be entitled to if CIA acknowledged some form of employee status? How would the CIA have acted toward the DeBruin family if it knew it was on the hook for the back pay and benefits for all the time Eugene is missing in action? I hasten to add that, to my knowledge, Jerry DeBruin has never brought up this issue with the CIA. He would have been satisfied with CIA assistance to determine his brother's fate before his parents died, never knowing the fate of their son. Since 1991, I have met with Jerry when he visits Washington, D.C. to attend annual meetings of the POW MIA group. Jerry is relentless in pushing the Lao, Vietnamese, and his own government for information about the fate of his brother. I try to help him with formulating his action plan whenever he needs to understand the mindless bureaucratic monster and how to best phrase things so the monster might understand. Jerry DeBruin is clearly his brother's keeper.